Who designed Bitcoin and how was it started? Well, in a separate video, I talk specifically about Satoshi Nakamoto, and I will try to remember to post that comment, the link to the YouTube video of that in the comments. If I forget, someone please do it for me. Anyway, so I'm not going to talk so much about Satoshi Nakamoto, the founder of Bitcoin, the creator, not founder because it's not a company, the creator. I won't talk so much about him in this video. I'll talk more about the launch process, and you can watch my video about Satoshi Nakamoto specifically if you want more details about the creator himself. Okay, so the idea for Bitcoin started back in the 1970s, the idea for a digital currency. Lots of different people tried it, lots of different ways. None of them could get it to work because they were all relying on some sort of central authority. And that central authority would end up getting corrupted somehow, or the government would shut it down for being an unlicensed money transmitter, or just, one series of bad things after the other. So, but all of the ideas were slowly falling into place. All the ideas were there. They just had never been combined in a way that would actually work in the real world. And so Satoshi Nakamoto, the inventor of Bitcoin, started working on it in the middle of 2007. And we know this because in January of 2009, he said he had been working on it for 18 months. So the middle of 07 plus all of 08, he launched it on January 3rd of 2009. So he initially wrote the white paper. The white paper is a 9-page document that describes Bitcoin. That went live on October 31st of 2008. So he started working on it in the middle of 2007. By October of 2008, he had written the white paper that described how it was going to work, and he released that on October 31st of 2008. And then it took him until January 3rd of 2009 to finish writing the first version of the software code for how it would work. So it took 18 months to design, but again, he was incorporating ideas that were literally 40 years in the making, 40 years. And his big ideas that he added that nobody else had thought of before was the difficulty adjustment, which I will not go into how that works. I can do that in a separate video, but I'm not going to do that on this one. The difficulty adjustment and the concept of a blockchain. And the ability, because of the difficulty adjustment and because of the fact that it was a blockchain, to make it decentralized, meaning with no one in control. You have to have a blockchain. The concept of a blockchain and a difficulty adjustment and those sorts of things are some things you have to have in order for the concept of a blockchain to work. Okay, so those things were sort of the secret sauce that Satoshi added, specifically the blockchain, to the technologies that had already been invented between probably 1969 and 2009. Let's call it about 40 years. Okay, so he has the white paper, he finishes the software, and when he launches the software on January 3rd of 2009, he wanted to communicate to the world why he was launching it and that it was a completely fair launch and that he had not been secretly creating Bitcoins in the background without anyone's knowledge or anything like that. So the way he did that was he launched the blockchain on January 3rd of 2009, and he embedded in the very first block 2 messages. Well, a single message, but it was intended to communicate 2 things. It said in the Genesis block, it's called the Genesis block, it's the very first block of the blockchain. That blockchain now has more than 900,000 blocks that have happened because there's been more than 900,000 10-minute intervals, and the Bitcoin blockchain adds a new block to the blockchain every 10 minutes. So there's been more than 900,000 blocks added since January 3rd of 2009. So in that very first block, he wanted to communicate that he had not mined that block earlier than January 3rd of 2009. So he did that by embedding in the block the message, Times of London, January 3rd, 2009, Chancellor on the brink of the second bailouts of the banks. So he communicated 2 things by that message. One, that he could not have mined the first block prior to January 3rd of 2009 because that was the heading of the Times of London newspaper on January 3rd of 2009, which is in cryptography, it's a very common way of anchoring things to the external world, is to imprint something that would not have been knowable before that date. So by saying Times of London, January 3rd, 2009, Chancellor on brink of second bailouts of the banks, he was taking the headline of the Times of London from January 3rd of 2009, meaning he could not have possibly created Bitcoin that first block prior to January 3rd of 2009 because nobody knew what the headline of the Times of London was going to be on January 3rd of 2009. I'm passing a wreck here that would not have happened if one or both of the parties had been driving Teslas. Somebody clearly rear-ended another person, and Teslas never do that, which is amazing. But anyway, it's all torn up, and both of their vehicles are all torn up, and a police car's there, and Teslas just don't do that, which is amazing, and I love it. But I am sad for them because their Toyota and their Chevrolet are in a really bad shape. Okay, so January 1st, 2009, that was the headline. Obviously, the Times of London decided to make that the headline of their newspaper either the night before or the morning of, so that the block could not have been mined any earlier than that. So the Bitcoin blockchain was launched on January 3rd of 2009, and it was important that that block had not been mined earlier because it was a fair launch. Unlike virtually every other cryptocurrency in the world, there's millions of them at this point, and they're all worthless, or almost all worthless, and nobody knows which ones aren't worthless. Other than Bitcoin. So by having a fair launch, Satoshi was communicating that, hey, I'm releasing the software to the world. Anyone can use the software. The Genesis block that kicks off the blockchain has a message in it that says it was not created prior to January 3rd of 2009. And so everybody gets a fair launch. Everybody can run their computers to mine this new Bitcoin. And in the early days, there was no Bitcoin, which means the only way you could get Bitcoin is to turn on your computer, run the Bitcoin software, and every 10 minutes, if your computer worked harder than the other computers, then you would get 50 Bitcoin. And it was 50 Bitcoin for the first 4 years, then it was 25 Bitcoin for the next 4 years, then it was 12.5 Bitcoin for the next 4 years, then it was 6.25 Bitcoin for the next 4 years, and since we're more than 16 years into the life of Bitcoin at this point, now someone who mines a Bitcoin gets 3.125 Bitcoin. Now, if there's no point in you or I trying to mine Bitcoin at this point, you basically have to have an entire massive army, literally server farms of specialized computers that do nothing but Bitcoin. There's no way for an average person to mine a Bitcoin. Not going to happen. Don't even try. Not worth it, et cetera, et cetera. But back then you could, and back then that was the only way to get Bitcoin because there was no marketplace for Bitcoin. So Satoshi Nakamoto wanted to communicate that, one, he had not secretly launched the network early. Two, it was a completely free and fair launch because everybody, including him, could just run the software starting at the same time and all then have equal chances of mining Bitcoin blocks so that the Bitcoin would be fairly distributed. That is different than Ethereum or Solana or XRP, which all started by the founders giving themselves a huge amount of the tokens for free and then forcing everyone else to pay for the tokens. So virtually every other cryptocurrency started unfairly. They started with whoever got there first doing something called a pre-mine. The pre-mine is where they made up a bunch of the tokens out of thin air first, and then they forced everybody to compete to get the rest of them, and then as the price of the token increases, the founders dump their tokens on the marketplace, which cost them nothing. And Satoshi Nakamoto wanted to be very clear that that is not what he was doing. He was launching this free and fair for the world, and that he had no intention of trying to front run it or give himself free tokens or anything like that. So that is how the network was launched. It was founded by Satoshi Nakamoto. I'll give you a few quick facts about him. First, it's not his real name. Nobody knows who Satoshi Nakamoto is. It's definitely a pseudonym. Nobody knows where he lives. People suspect, based on the time zones of when he posted online, that he was from the United States. He claimed to be from Japan because he picked the name Satoshi Nakamoto, but nobody thinks he was from Japan. He alternated between English spelling and American spelling of the English language. So he would use words like color, C-O-L-O-R, sometimes, and words color, C-O-L-O-U-R. So he'd use words like, that interchangeably, G-R-A-Y, G-R-E-Y. He would alternate between British and American spelling of the English language, but he was always writing in English, and he was clearly, English was his native tongue. For his birthday, he selected, the day of his birthday, he selected as the day that FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, confiscated everyone's gold. And Satoshi Nakamoto often compared Bitcoin to digital gold. It's a digital electronic gold. It's as precious and more as now it's more, it's as valuable as gold, except you can send it over the internet. So he chose the day that Franklin Delano Roosevelt forcibly took away everyone's gold back in 1933. He chose that day as his birthday, and he chose the year of his birthday on the message boards online, the public forums. He chose the year of his birthday, the year that Americans were allowed to re-own gold, which I think was 1776. It was either 1775 or 1776 that average people owning gold was re-legalized after Franklin Delano Roosevelt forcibly confiscated everyone's gold in 1933. That was reversed, I think, in 1975 or 1976. Anyway, that was the year Satoshi chose to as his birthday. And the difficulty adjustment, which is how often the Bitcoin algorithm adjusts to make it easier or harder to mine the Bitcoin so that it's always mined about every 10 minutes, that is every 2016 blocks, 2016, which is the exact inverse of Executive Order 6102, which is the executive order where Franklin Delano Roosevelt took away everyone's gold. That was done, forcible confiscation of the gold was done with Executive Order 6102. And when Satoshi Nakamoto created Bitcoin, he set the difficulty adjustment at 2016, which is the inverse 4 digits of 6102. And then at various points, he talked about in the message boards about how he was trying to create digital gold, how, the physical yellow metal gold had been confiscated. He talked about the fact that he was trying to create an alternative money that the government could not confiscate that worked over the internet. And obviously by using the headline, Chancellor on the brink of second bailout of the banks, he highlighted the fact that he had created Bitcoin as an answer to the 2008 financial recession and all the insanity and stupidity of all of that with bailouts everywhere. Because in Bitcoin, there are no bailouts. You can't make money out of thin air. So you can't bail anyone out because Bitcoin is Bitcoin. Like, you can't just print money out of thin air and give it to people who make bad decisions like they did in 2008. And, most of the worst, behaving people got bailed out, which is, crazy. So anyway, all that to say, that is how Bitcoin was, to recap, it took 18 months to create. It was created by someone named Satoshi Nakamoto. I'll post in the comments the link to the video where I talk about Satoshi Nakamoto. It was launched 18 months after it was started, the creation started, which was about 2 months after the white paper was released, which was January 3rd of 2009. And it was a free and fair launch where everyone in the world could start running the software simultaneously and have an equal shot at Bitcoin. And then he launched it on message boards and said, hey, I've created this new amazing thing. Everyone, please try it out. And most of the people thought it wouldn't work. The reception back then was surprisingly tepid of people saying, we've been trying to create digital currency for 40 years now. It's never worked. It's never going to work. Surely you haven't cracked the code that everybody else has failed at. Well, he did. Just like for decades, people were talking about AI and how big a deal AI was going to be. And 40 years of people trying to do AI, finally, OpenAI with their app ChatGPT finally cracks the code. And suddenly AI is a huge deal. It went from basically nothing for decades, and then suddenly ChatGPT turned the corner, cracked the code, cracked the nut, and made it actually work. And suddenly, boom, AI is everywhere. That's the same way Bitcoin was. They had been trying to crack the code on how to create a digital money that was scarce, that you could not just copy paste and make more of. They had tried to do that for 40 years. And finally, Satoshi Nakamoto put in place the very last pieces of the puzzle and boom, made it work. But most people thought it couldn't work. So he actually had to do a ton of marketing of this new idea, posting it on message boards, encouraging people to try it. And most of the people were just ignored it. The vast majority of people who are aware of it were like, this has been tried, something like this has been tried too many times, it's never going to work. And he kept saying, yeah, but nobody's tried it this way. This is decentralized. Nobody's in control. It runs on servers all over the world. There's no one single point of failure. There's nobody for the government to go arrest. There's no single point for the government to go shut it down. And finally, enough people believed him that they tried the software and it did work. And here we are today with Bitcoin worth more than $2.5 trillion. And, probably 400 million people in the world own it, which is still only 5% of the population, which is why if you're buying Bitcoin now, you're still very early because, Bitcoin is only owned by 5% of the world, which means 95% of the world owns 0 Bitcoin. So anyway, that's the story of the creation and launch of Bitcoin. And again, watch my video specifically about Satoshi Nakamoto if you want a little more detail on all of that. Have a great day, everyone. Thanks.